Welcome to another episode of Sussex Sport Weekly Podcast. I'm Matt Poll, and this week I'm joined by Brighton and Hove Albion writers Derren Howard and Frankie Elliott, and Steve Bone, who covers all things sport in Sussex for our newspapers and online at sussexworld.co.uk/sport. The wait for Albion fans is finally over. Brighton kick off their Premier League campaign at home to Luton Town this Saturday, hoping to repeat last season's heroics. We'll look ahead to Saturday's action and reflect on all the latest transfer news from the club, including the latest developments on the ongoing Moses Caicedo saga. We'll also have the latest from Crawley Town, as well as the Sussex non-league scene and Sussex Sharks, who are in the midst of their one-day cup campaign. But as I said at the top of the podcast, the Seagulls kick off what will be a historic season on Saturday. Albion welcome Premier League new boys Luton Town to the Amex at 3 p.m. in their first league game with the new campaign. What's the prevailing mood at Albion going into this one, Derren? It must be excitement to get the new season started and see what the new boys can do.
Yeah, exactly that. Really, it seems as though it's the best it's ever been at Brighton, really. And I think the players are up for it, the managers are up for it, and the fans. It's just the best time in the history of the club at the moment, really, put simply. And they're going into the new season playing against the newly promoted team, Luton Town. You're never quite sure what to expect, but yeah, the squad looks in good shape. They've got one of the best managers they've ever had in the club's history. The squad looks really strong. I know they've lost Alexis McAllister, and the Moses Caicedo thing is rumbling on. But if you look around that and how they've built the actual squad ahead of the new season, I think they've done very well. I think there's always a temptation to just sort of go for it, but they have done so. But I think in a very measured and sensible way with the players that they brought in, the two on the free transfers, James Milner and Mo Dahoud. I think that'd be very good additions for the midfield as the season progresses. And then you've got the young attacking talents of Adingra, who's come in as well. He looked sharp in pre-season, and João Pedro, of course, the 30 million summer signing, and he's looked ready to go. I think he's going to be a big player for Brighton this season. So yeah, when you look at the balance of the squad with the senior players and then the young players that are going to add this sort of flair and attacking impetus to the team as well, I think it's looking really, really promising. It's going to be tough. They're going to be in Europa League. It's going to be this, a lot of Sunday, Thursday football, but that's what the club have been gearing towards. I don't think the players mind that. They know that this is going to happen. They're in Europa League, and I think they're going to go for it all guns blazing, really. I think they're really going to look to win some silverware this season, potentially. It seems almost quite mad to say, really, that Brighton are going to be challenging, amongst the top teams. But I really think they've got a squad capable of doing that this season. So yeah, lots and lots to look forward to.
What do you think we can expect from Luton on Saturday, Frankie? They brought in a mix of EFL stars and Premier League fringe players, and the latest sign has been Ross Barkley. On paper, all signs are pointing to a Brighton win, but I'm sure it's going to be a much more tougher assignment than probably people are going to give it credit for.
Yeah, all bookies and all fans would expect Brighton to win on Saturday. They were the best team, or one of the best teams in England last year. They're playing at home, and they're playing a team that's not only promoted from the Championship last year, which is obviously difficult, but they're playing a team that 6 years ago were kicking off in League Two. 9 years ago were kicking off in the Conference. So they're playing a club that are not only new to Premier League football, but new to this journey. Has been one of the most incredible journeys in English football for the last 15, 20 years. But that being said, I feel that Luton cannot be underestimated because they've been underestimated this whole time. No one expected them to get out of the Championship. A lot of people, I remember when they were promoted to League One, didn't expect them to last very long there. They've always been a small club in every division they've played in. They're a small club in the Championship. They're not a particularly big team in League One. They're a team with a lot of history, but at the end of the day, their ground holds 10,500 fans. It's a very small football club in that sense. So they've been working on a very small budget. If you look at the players they've brought in, Maz Anderson from Barnsley playing League One football last year, Ogbene from Rotherham, a very handy player, but no experience above the Championship. Tyne Chong, the Manchester United you've seen player, again, no much more experience outside of the Championship. So none of those signings are players that you'd expect them to sort of improve the squad. But if you look at the squad, what they should be doing, and I'm sure they will be doing under Rob Edwards, is playing to their strengths. All the best teams that come up from the Championship and stay from the Championship is not try to expand and play a different style of football and bring in players on big price tags. Just stick to what you're good at. And what Luton are fantastic at is direct football. They play with two up front. They play a 3-5-2. It's a very rigid system, but their direct play to Adebayo and Carlton Morris up front is phenomenal. It was what got them into the playoffs last year. It's what got them the goals they needed to win games. Carlton Morris got more than 20 goals last season, being the big target man. They use him brilliantly, and they should continue to do that. You know, if they continue to do that and play what is very much a very English, British style of football, I think they'll cause a lot of issues. I really do, because I think teams won't be used to it. You know, a lot of Premier League teams play a very similar way nowadays, playing out from the back, playing free in midfield. All those caveats that we're used to seeing now. I think Luton coming up and bringing a lot of players that haven't played top level football before, but have played a lot of football in the EFL, which is a lot tougher, a lot more physical, which they can bring with them, and are very good from set pieces as well. Tom Lockyer, who I 10 years ago, while standing on the terraces, watched him play for Bristol Rovers. I had no idea he'd be playing Premier League football, and I'd be reporting on him. But he will be an asset from set pieces. He scored 4 goals from corners last year. He is very dangerous. They like I say, this is a classic British team. Balls into the box, corners, free kicks. You know, Roberto De Zerbi wouldn't have played against a side like this before at all. And so it'll be I'm sure he will be prepared to play them off the park like he does every other team by keeping the ball. But Luton will go there and fancy their chances. They'll fancy their chances just because of the fact that they are bringing something that Brighton haven't faced under De Zerbi yet. And obviously, of course, it's away from home, so it's going to be difficult for them. But going to Kenilworth Road, where it's a very tight, we know about the famous away end, but it's a very tight ground. It's close to the pitch. All those fans in very close proximity. It'd be a very difficult place to go for a lot of big teams. So I'm expecting them to actually cause a few upsets this season.
Have you been to Kenilworth Road, Steve?
I have, many times, although not for a long time. Used to go there. Also, I'm a Portsmouth fan, as is known, and went there quite a few times in the 80s and 90s. Generally, had quite a rotten time, to be honest. And squeezed in there in terraces that couldn't quite cope with the number of fans we had there. And we used to lose there quite often as well. You could say that about most away grounds, but I don't think the ground has changed very much since those days. I think they're doing some work on it now. I think they're having to, aren't they? They will have looked at contingency plans to get the attendance up and perhaps even move home. But Frankie touched on it there. When a few years ago, Pompey were with Luton in League One, and Luton started to do quite well. They had a very good first half of the season, and a lot of people were saying, "Well, they won't be in the top 2 come the end of the season. They won't carry that on." Nobody predicted that. They've only just come up from League 2, but they did. They defied the logic and the doubters then, as they did last year in the Championship. So write them off at your peril, I think, this year.
Do we think that they've got a chance of staying up, chaps, Luton?
It's going to be very, very tough.
Yeah, I think they will.
Yeah, fair enough. I've seen most people have predicted them to finish rock bottom in this league. So it will be interesting to see whether or not they prove people wrong. But as Frankie and Steve have both said, they have a history of proving the doubters wrong.
Sorry, Matt, just to quickly add on to that. The teams that do brilliantly that we don't expect to over the years, Stoke City, when they came up in 2008, stayed in the Prem for a number of years. No one expected them to do that. Burnley, no one expected them to stay in the Premier League for as long as they did. I know they went down the season after, but Sheffield United, when they came up, they were within touching distance of getting European football in their first season. The main thing they all did was stick to their guns. Direct football, aggressive football, set-piece based football. Not particularly pretty, but it's what gets you points. And if Luton are another one of those teams that I think under a very, very good coach, Rob Edwards, a brilliant man management, worked under Rob Jones, who I know it didn't work at Southampton, but was the reason Luton have come this far. If they continue to stick to those guns, there's no reason to say they can't pick up points in the Premier League.
I'll ask you your predictions at the end of the podcast, chaps, to the Premier League, and see what we have to say. We'll look forward to that. Moving back to Brighton, how are they stacked for Saturday, Derren? Any major doubts on how many of the new boys do you think we might see against Luton?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see that there's so many options now that De Zerbi's got to choose from. But I think João Pedro will start. He's looked like razor sharp in pre-season. I think that he'll find a place for him in the team. But I also think his trusted favourites from last year will start. Kara Matoma, and then Solly March, and then either one of Danny Welbeck or Evan Ferguson will start. But I think the way Pedro and Welbeck linked up in the friendly against Rayo, it wasn't sort of the most enthralling match, the final tune-up last Saturday, but there were some promising signs. I like the way Pedro and Welbeck were playing together, and I think those two will start against Luton Town. And then you may see Adingra from the bench as well, and the likes of Enciso coming off the bench as well. The midfield area is going to be very interesting as well. Whether I'm pretty sure Caicedo won't play, but you never know. But the feeling I get is that especially after the last Sunday where he was given the weekend off by the club. To get his head right, and then they said there was a hamstring issue as well, which, so we'll see what happens with that one. But the word is that Chelsea are now getting closer to that 100 million valuation, and if that transfer is creeping closer, I don't think he will play against Luton. So how he lines up that midfield is going to be key. To remember, Alexis McAllister moved to Liverpool earlier in the transfer window, so those two were the two big players for Brighton last season. So I imagine there'll be Pascal Gross will be in the midfield as well, one of De Zerbi's trusted senior players. And then you could see the likes of Adam Lallana in there as well, Billy Gilmore, or perhaps Mo Dahoud as well. So there's a few good options in there. Brighton are still in talks with this, or they've reached an agreement still with Ajax for Mohamed Kudus as well. But I don't see that getting over the line in time for the Luton game. That could go through once the Caicedo deal is done and dusted. But Kudus would be a great signing to bring in as well. But yeah, I think that's the main talk. But Jakub Moder, the midfielder as well, he hasn't featured at all in pre-season. He hasn't played for over a year since he picked up his serious ACL injury on his knee. So I don't think he certainly won't be involved. Tariq Lamptey, he's started training with the group only for about a week or so now. He had a knee injury again. He was expected to be fit at the back end of last season. That got put back. And he hasn't really had a full pre-season as well. So that's taken longer than expected to heal. He didn't feature in the summer series as well. So hopefully he will be back at some stage, but not against Luton. But yeah, I think overall though they're in good shape.
Well, you mentioned the friendly there on Sunday, Derren. I had the misfortune of being there as a paying fan, and I said this to Steve Bowe. It was up there with. Do you remember when England played Algeria at the 2010 World Cup? It might be up there as one of the worst games of football I've ever seen. That friendly, but never mind, pre-season friendly.
It was, yeah. It wasn't they sat back quite. They didn't sort of go for it at all, did they, Rayo? They sort of sat back very deep, and it was it was a strange sort of game. Strange game.
Well, it kind of brings me on to this next point here. Jason Steele made a bit of a howler, didn't he, for the Rayo goal?
Did.
And I think one area of interest from any Brighton supporters is who will start in goal. It's between Jason Steele and summer signing Bart Verbruggen. Who do you expect to see between the sticks for the Seagulls on Saturday, Frankie?
I just want to say, a boring friendly. You deserve that, Matt, for paying a ticket to go watch a friendly. That's sacrilege. But moving on from that.
Oh, it was £20, but it was £20 too much. Oh,
Jesus.
So yeah, we won't do that again.
So lesson learned. But yeah, he did make a mistake last Sunday, which doesn't really help my claim. But I do think he will start on Saturday. I do think he's done enough to warrant still keeping that first team shirt. But I have been thinking recently, obviously with Sanchez is now gone, that saga has now been complete, and he's moved away from the club. Looking back at when Jason Steele came into the side back in March of this year, he did deserve it. He had warranted. He had played well in those few games he had played for Brighton. But I feel looking back that De Zerbi actually used him as a sort of splash of cold water on Sanchez's face. I think he felt that Sanchez was not playing terribly, but not playing well enough to the high standards De Zerbi had. And I feel that he put Steele in because he could still trust him. But I thought it was more of a sort of a marker, like, look, this is what I want you to do. This is what I want you to work on. I still see you as my first choice goalkeeper. We then saw Sanchez's reaction, which is obviously what De Zerbi was not expecting. So therefore, the cog go in place for a replacement. This is obviously what Bart Verbruggen is, because as great as Jason Steele has been for the club, and he has been brilliant in the last 4 or 5 months, unfortunately, it's harsh, but we've also seen what sort of goalkeeper he is at Sunderland and Blackburn, which is one that is not good, and it's not good for the Championship or even League One when he was playing with Blackburn. So that mistake last week highlighted that there is that goalkeeper in there, and I feel that De Zerbi knows that. So the signing of Bart Verbruggen was an interesting one to me, because it obviously said to me that he doesn't see Jason Steele as his number one long term. I think he obviously still has a lot of respect for him and wants to show that his form is not something that he didn't appreciate, and will start him on Saturday. But it's only a matter of time, I feel, because on the flip side, Brighton, with a budget that Brighton have, you don't spend £16 million on a second choice goalkeeper. You sign a goalkeeper like that to get into your first team and start straight away. So I would feel that Steele is now under pressure, and it's interesting to see how Steele does under pressure, because he came in March with nothing. The shackles were off. This was his opportunity to shine, and he took it. But now he's got a goalkeeper behind him who's got no issues with the manager, who's working very hard, who's a new kid on the block, and there's a lot of talk of him being an excellent goalkeeper when he was playing for Anderlecht. How will Steele cope with that would be the question, because you feel if another mistake comes, whether it be at Luton or a couple of games down the line, that he'll be dropped. So I feel that his days are slightly numbered if he continues to perform like he did last Sunday, and we see the old Jason Steele from before he joined Brighton. So it's interesting how quickly football moves, because all of a sudden Steele is finding his spot not as safe as it once was. But for Saturday he should start.
Well, you mentioned it there, Frankie, as well. Robert Sanchez has gone to Chelsea. He's completed a £25 million move and ends his decade-long stay, at the Amex. Albion must be pretty pleased with the fee that they received for Sanchez, Derren, you'd think?
I'd say so, yeah, after what's happened there. There was I saw a couple of reports saying that Brighton must be actually disappointed with the fee that they got, because they were quoting, 40-50 million prior to what happened. But I thought that was seriously inflated at the time. I think Sanchez has made quite a few clangers so far in his career, and he is a keeper. He's a keeper with raw talent. He hasn't played that many games, Premier League games, so he is still a work in progress. And I think 25 million at this stage of his career, considering what happened and how he responded to being dropped last time, I think it's a deal that suits both parties. Brighton have got a very respectable fee for him. Chelsea have got a keeper they can work with and can perhaps compete with Kepa for the first team jersey for the coming season. And then Brighton moved on. They've got Jason Steele, and then they've also got Bart Verbruggen as well, who can come in and looks, as Frankie was saying, he's going to put quite a bit of pressure on Jason Steele this season. So yeah, it was inevitable that Sanchez was going to leave, and it's the best possible outcome for all parties, really.
Well, I think, has he signed something like a 7-year contract at Chelsea or something along those lines?
I believe it was. Yeah, it's a very long contract that he signed with them. So yeah,
I was going to ask you, what do we make of clubs? I think it's kind of, since Todd Bowley's taken over at Chelsea, clubs are more likely to offer multi-year, long-term contracts. Is that good business sense, or is it just wasting money?
It's done to sort of bend the rules of FFP. So if you offer a longer contract, the fee that you pay originally is sort of dissected into the years of that contract. So it means that if you look at your your balances from a season, it doesn't look as bad. So for Chelsea last year, they spent, was it 550 million on FFP? It won't show as a 550 million because the deals for like people like Enzo Fernandez, Badiashile, Sanchez this summer will look just for the year, how much they're paying for that year of that contract will show up. So it's not to do with like a project of, we're going to want to keep them for 7 years and build them as a player. It's just a financial thing. So it's quite hollow, really.
Yeah, there you go. Well, educational and entertaining, this podcast. I didn't know that. Meanwhile, speaking of transfers, the Moises Caicedo to Chelsea deal continues to rumble on. The latest is that Caicedo, I think as Derren mentioned, missed training on Monday, and sources close to the player said he's frustrated over Brighton's stance around a potential move to Chelsea. Chelsea have had a succession of bids for the Ecuador midfielder rejected. Brighton have said they still don't expect anyone to reach the £100 million valuation for Caicedo, and as if the situation has not changed. Originally, I put, as the days tick on, do you think there's a very small chance Caicedo will be a Brighton player until at least January, Frankie? But I think there have been further developments, haven't there, in the long run saga?
Yeah, well, I mean, in the last day or so, it seems to have got moved another full circle. At the start of this week, although Caicedo missed that last friendly and missed training on Monday, as we've said for nearly a month now, the fee was nowhere near being agreed. It looked very much likely that Caicedo would at least be a player for the first game of the season. Then there was talks of a fifth bid being prepared, and again, Brighton was still very confident that fifth bid would be nowhere near the valuation. Now we're hearing that Chelsea are very confident they're going to get this wrapped up before they want to get him signed for the first game of the season against Liverpool. So it seems to be moving in all sorts of directions again. But as I say that, no fee has been agreed yet. So we don't know. This is obviously Chelsea are very confident. Brighton are very confident. As of yet, Caicedo is still very much a Brighton player. And this has been one of the most bizarre transfer sagas I think I've seen because Chelsea and Liverpool are very much in the same boat at the moment. They both need a central defensive midfielder. And they're both sort of acting sort of flabbergasted by the price of central midfielders. And the problem in football is that if you sit there and complain about the market or how much players are for too long, you get left behind. And this is what is happening, especially for Liverpool, is we all agree, all fans, all players, all agree £100 million for a player is ridiculous. It's astronomical. Caicedo hasn't even played 100 career games. It's all we all totally agree, but that is the market. I mean, especially for Chelsea, they signed Enzo Fernandez for us. You set the price of midfielders. Now, in the modern day, Declan Rice, Enzo Fernandez have gone for 100 million to all clubs who have a similar age player who's valued at the same sort of, who can play at the same sort of level. All clubs will say, well, we want 100 million as well. That's aside. Chelsea know that. Why on earth in the first, I think that first bid came in the start of July, end of June, they put 60 million in. Now, 60 million is not only less than the bid that was put in January by Arsenal, it's also 40 million less than they paid for Fernandez and 40 million less than Rice. Who's on that negotiation table that was obviously going to be rejected? And if they do agree a fee and it's less than 100 million, it's not going to be much less. I would imagine the least amount of fee is by 10 million, so about 90 million pounds. Why did it take so long to get there? Because Caicedo is, if he is signed by Sunday, he was not trained. He would not train with Chelsea. And Chelsea have only got two recognised central midfielders at the moment, Enzo Fernandez and Conor Gallagher. So Pochettino must be furious because he's got very limited options for a game against Liverpool. Liverpool in the same boat with this Romeo Lavia. He's been valued by Southampton at 50 million. They've put in 2 or 3 bids below that. Why are they wasting their time? Jurgen Klopp's got a game against Chelsea Sunday with no recognised central defensive midfielder. Both these managers must be tearing their hair out because both of these clubs have sat there and just, sort of been scratching their head. I couldn't believe what these clubs want for central midfielders. When Arsenal saw they wanted Declan Rice, they put the money in, they got him, and now that midfield looks very strong for their first game since against Nottingham Forest. So it's a bizarre turn of events. And Brighton, I stand by this. Brighton have done nothing wrong. I think Brighton are very, very, very comfortable in the sense that they put this evaluation on him. They know that Caicedo will play for them even if he is upset. Doesn't seem like a particularly troublesome person. I'm sure they've got a backup plan. That Brighton have. We know their track record of losing players and being able to. I'm sure even with less than 14, 15 days to go the window, they've got a plan in place that everyone is happy with, including De Zerbi. I think Brighton are okay. I think the people that are going to be upset are the other people in the deal because Caicedo's start to the season is hampered. He's going in with a knock as well, so I'm sure he's not going in 100% fit. Chelsea have got a player that isn't trained with the squad, and also he's a player that's unsettled. And it's a good job that Robert Sanchez wasn't on that pre-season tour, because if Caicedo was sitting next to him in the changing room and seeing him throw his toys out the pram and be a difficult player and get a move to the club he's been wanting to get a move for 3 weeks and a couple of days, it must have been, his head would have probably gone. But it's been a crazy couple of months. I think we've spoken about it since the start of June. So we've been here for about two whole months. And in some respects, it's no closer than then.
No.
But this is what I am reiterating too, is I don't understand why, when Chelsea and Liverpool are so desperate to sign someone in that position, you would act so slowly, because the only people that it hurts are your managers, and that's the last thing you want to upset.
Have we seen that Chelsea still haven't learned their lesson? They've put in a £48 million bid for Romeo Lavia at Southampton, apparently, and Southampton want 50 million for him. So they clearly, whoever's negotiating at Chelsea is doing such an awful job. I don't understand. I want his job. It sounds brilliant. But yeah, we mentioned Caicedo again and his behaviour.
Sorry, I think my sound went.
No, you're right. I think
I'll get right. Perfect.
I was going to say, Brighton believe Caicedo will continue to behave professionally throughout the current transfer window, but now that his position seems like it's being tested. I can understand why there is frustration from Caicedo's side, Derren, but do you think it'll be exacerbated by his representatives? We kind of saw a little bit like that last January with the whole Arsenal switch, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. But yeah, it's been going on for quite some time now, and I think everybody's just waiting for it to finish. We've done quite well out of it because we're getting quite good web hits off the every story. But there's been a lot of interest in it. The fans are keen to read up on what's happening, and it's just been a bit of a soap opera, really, from start to finish. The only thing that's changed from now until January is that Brighton are prepared to sell. Last January, they weren't going to sell no matter what, because they were fighting to compete in Europe, and they needed Caicedo and McAllister at the hub of their midfield in order to do that. They said to Caicedo, look, stay with us now, and then you can get your move in the summer, but on the proviso that the club meets our valuation, and that valuation is 100 million. There's no secret in that. And as we say, I think Caicedo is a £100 million player in the current market. He's 21 years old. He could be at Chelsea for the next 10 years. So if you look at it over that period, it's quite a good transfer. And if they wanted to sell him, in 5 or 6 years' time at age 26, 27, they could still command a good fee for him as well. So I think Brighton are right to hold out on their 100 million. They are willing to sell, and they will sell if Chelsea get to that figure. But I don't think I think De Zerbi is going to have quite a tough stance with him. I think it would be, I'd be amazed if he's in the starting lineup for Luton, because the other players would look at this and think, well, he hasn't been committed, he hasn't played in the pre-season. So I think it would send out the wrong signal, no matter if he is Brighton's best player, if he did start against Luton. So I think Caicedo's pushing for the move. I think his representatives are pushing for the move, as they have been. They're going to earn a fortune out of it. If Caicedo does get his Chelsea move, then it's a massive deal for Caicedo's representatives. So they're going to be absolutely keen for this to go through, because they get paid, huge amounts. So whether that's actually in Caicedo's best interests or not, but it's to be seen. But it would be a good move for him if he goes to Chelsea, I'm sure.
On a more positive note on the transfer front, as Derren has also mentioned, Brighton are understood to have reached an agreement over a fee with Ajax for Mohamed Kudus. However, there is no agreement yet between Brighton and the Ghana midfielder, easy for me to say, over personal terms. Could you tell us a bit more about Kudus, please, Frankie? What would he add to Brighton, and should fans be excited about the potential move?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've spoken quite a few times in the last couple of months about statement signings by Brighton, because obviously they are now playing in the Europa League, and their recruitment has always been players that are unknown and sort of building them into the squad. But now we've got a player. Well, when they were going for someone like Levi Colwell, one of the best young centre backs in the world, they were trying to sign him permanently. That was a big statement. I felt they were trying to say that they were going to not just be a one-trick pony and one season wonder, so to speak, in Europe. They wanted to be a top-level club for a number of years. And then I feel this one is another version of that. If they can get this one over the line, this is a player that I expected, especially after the season he's just had, to be moving to a Champions League club. I thought he was excellent last season for Ajax. Watched him a number of times in the Champions League. I'm sure a lot of fans saw his goal at Anfield last year. He was a very, very exciting player. It was an exceptional goal. He's only 22, playing for Ajax, obviously a very big club, the biggest club in the Netherlands. You just assume that his next move would be to, a big European team. So for Brighton to potentially get this one over the line is a huge statement of where they are in world football, I have to say, because he is very, very exciting. He's a box of tricks in the sense that his athleticism, his speed, his strength. He's a very tall man for a sort of centre attacking mid. Can play off the right as well, but centre attacking mid is his main position. But he is the sort of player, that classic saying, he gets people off their seats. You normally see him pick up the ball in sort of central areas and happily take on 2-3 players, using all those attributes. Said his strength, his height, his speed, his acceleration to get round people and do it effectively. I think he scored 18 goals last season, so he's a great finisher as well. His movement in the box is exceptional. He scores with both his head and his feet. Like I said, that goal at Anfield, touch out of his feet, bang, top corner. Like, he's not afraid to have a shot very quickly, and that catches goalkeepers off guard a lot of the time. But yeah, for someone that scored 4 goals in the Champions League last year, 18 overall, this isn't a player that's coming in like Mo Dahoud, who has not really been playing for Borussia Dortmund for a number of years and trying to revitalise his career. This is a man coming in and coming towards the top of his game. So not only do I think if Brighton signed a brilliant player for this season, as Derren alluded to with Caicedo, a couple of years down the line, this could be a player they sell for 60, 70, 80 million. So I think if this goes through, it's a bit of a dilemma of who comes out of this team, because obviously Brighton have got a pretty settled 11 and some really good players that could come off the bench. But this is the first superstar signing, or the closest to a superstar signing that Brighton have made. And I think it will be it'll be an excellent move. The only one downside I could possibly see is that flip side question is, why is he moving to Brighton? Why is he not going to a bigger club? Because his technique is not great. His first touch isn't the best. He's not he's not a technical wizard. He uses all those athletic attributes to help his game to get goals. Will that be the hindrance that stops him from becoming a brilliant player in the big European leagues? But that's a very small minor point, because he's only 22. But outside of that, this is a huge signing.
Moving on from Brighton to Crawley Town, they enjoyed a dream start to their League 2 campaign on Saturday. A superb Will Wright free kick secured a 1-0 home win over 10-man Bradford City to kick off the red season in style. Crawley were knocked out of the Carabao Cup on Tuesday evening, going down 2-1 at Exeter City, but will hope to make it 2 league wins from 2 this Saturday, away at much fancied Salford City. But this weekend also sees the start of the real best league in the world, Steve Bone, the Isthmian Premier. Fans of Sussex clubs Bognor, Hastings, Horsham, Lewis and Whitehawk will all be dreaming of lifting the title in May and securing promotion to the National League South. The Isthmian Premier is always a tight division to call, isn't it, Steve? But which of our clubs looks best placed to mount a promotion push this season?
Yeah, nice to be talking about proper football now. That's leave this Premier League nonsense behind. Just one observation before I go on to Isthmian Premier is that you're talking about Chelsea still sort of wondering who's going to be in their midfield Sunday. Eastbourne Borough and Worthing both kicked off in the National South last weekend, which I think we'll talk about in a minute.
Yeah,
Eastbourne Borough have bought a whole new squad of 18 this summer. They bought most of them in end of May, June, early July. They had their squad together from the start of pre-season. Worthing have signed half a dozen and let half a dozen go. They were all in by the middle of pre-season. It does make you wonder. I know we're talking about different levels, but they're working within a budget as well. It does make you wonder how clubs at that level can be so well organised with rebuilding, and someone like Chelsea and others at the top level can't. Just an observation. Anyway,
that's true. Very true.
Don't want to upset too many Chelsea fans this early in the season. Isthmian Premier, though, very difficult to call. It was hard to call last year, and we ended up with Horsham, Lewis and Hastings all very close together in the table, all just missed out on the playoffs. Bognor didn't do so well last year, finished 14th. So those 4 will go again in the same league this year, with Whitehawk, who have spent some money and made some good signings. They've picked up a couple of Eastbourne Borough players. So again, very hard to say which of those 5 is going to be our highest placed team. I think you could make a case for any of them, having a good go at the playoffs. Whether any of them are quite good enough to win the title, I don't know. There'll be 3 or 4 teams from a little further north that will fancy the title. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Hastings might just be our top Sussex side in that division this year. Despite a lot of upheaval there, they lost the manager, the chairman, and half the team at the end of last season. Gary Alfick moved on, Billy Wood moved on, a lot of well-established players moved on too. Paul Barnes has come in as manager, absolutely knows his way around that level and around football in the southeast, got very good contacts, and he's built what looks like quite a strong squad. They've had a good pre-season, good fan numbers getting in for the games, and I just think they might actually, whereas at the end of May we were probably thinking, well, Hastings might have a transitional season. I'm not so sure now. I think they might do it actually very well. But I wouldn't write off any of the others as well. Horsham, who you know more about than me, they've made some good signings. Bognor have strengthened in attack, which was a concern when they lost last season's top scorer, Adokanyero. Lewis have lost Joe Taylor, which is a big loss, but they've made some good signings as well. They've signed a striker to replace him. They've also brought in Chris Whelpdale, ex-Eastbourne Borough, ex-Football League player. And Whitehawk, you never know what Whitehawk are going to do, but when they get the bit between their teeth, they can be a very successful team. It's going to be fascinating to follow it, and we'll all be doing that from this Saturday onwards.
Best of luck to all Sussex teams, but especially Cumberland Horsham. Meanwhile, as you mentioned there, Steve, Eastbourne Borough and Worthing, they both enjoyed winning starts to their respective National League South campaigns on Saturday. The Sports ran out 1-0 winners over Hampton and Richmond Borough, while Worthing left it very late to beat 10-man Tunbridge by the same scoreline. It was a great weekend, wasn't it, for both clubs, Steve? I was looking at the attendances, and over 1,000 were at Worthing, while almost 2,000 were at Eastbourne. It's exciting times for both clubs, isn't it? Yeah,
but both those clubs are just on an upward trajectory at the moment. Eastbourne Borough, especially there, it's a real revolution at Eastbourne Borough. Since new owner came in end of May, start of June. New manager soon followed him, and I think they've got 2 players left in the squad from last season. They've completely rebuilt. They look to have a quite a varied squad, a lot of young talent, but some experienced players as well. I think they're unbeaten in pre-season, and they've carried that on into the start of the league season. Hampton and Richmond are very well established opponents at that division. They've beaten them 1-0, scored fairly early, and then defended well when they've had to. 1,900 at Eastbourne Borough, which is, they were getting good crowds under Danny Blore over the last couple of seasons when they've been pushing for the playoffs. But you go back even 2 or 3 years, and they've pretty much doubled their average home attendance, which is incredible, really. Just shows there is the potential in Eastbourne. It's a big town, potential in Eastbourne for that project to sort of go on and really take off. As ever, those crowd numbers will dip a little bit if the form dips, but if they're at the right end and they're pushing for the title or the playoffs, those people will, I'm sure, keep coming back. It's quite an exciting brand of football, apparently, that Mark Beard is getting his team to play, so that helps as well. Worthing as well, surprised a few last season with how well they did in National South in their first try at that level. So, sometimes the second season can be harder because teams know what to expect from you, know how to play you, and it is going to be a hard league again. You only have to look at the fact that Worthing are off to Torquay on Saturday. You've got that sort of calibre of team in that division, very well established former Football League team that they're coming up against. But good start for Worthing. They looked a little bit weak at times in pre-season, but they looked strong at the end of it. And again, they've carried that on. Every manager loves a 1-0 win, and if the goal comes in the 95th minute, it doesn't matter, does it? The record books will only show a 1-0 win. So great start for those two. Hope they both continue to battle away at the right end.
Well, this year's FA Cup also. Oh, sorry,
Steve. Just a quick one on Eastbourne Borough again. Danny Blore did a good job last year. Where has he? Has he got another club? Where's he
gone to? Yes, he has. He was soon back in management. Actually, he's still in National South, and he is at Welling.
Oh, is it? He's gone. Yeah.
Yes. It'd be interesting to see how he does there. I think Welling come to Eastbourne Borough quite early in the season as well. So that could be a spicy afternoon. They didn't have such a good start. They're actually, albeit after one game, they're actually bottom of the table because they lost 5-2 to Truro on the weekend. So a bit of work for Danny to do there, but he'll be getting stuck into that. And I'm sure Eastbourne Borough fans loved Danny, and I'm sure they'll wish him well and give him a good welcome back when he comes.
Was that Welling game away from home, Steve, at Truro?
Yeah, I think it was. Yes.
Ooh, it's a long way to go to get.
It is a long way. Yeah, they're still on the way back, I think.
Well, yes, this year's FA Cup has also got underway, and I think it's 10 Sussex clubs advanced to the preliminary round, which take place on Saturday, August 19th. You can view the full draw for the next round of the Cup online at sussexworld.co.uk/sport. Can you give us a rundown of the standout results for our clubs in the extra preliminary round, please, Steve? Any scouts or shocks?
Yes, absolutely, yeah. So I was doing a little bit of research for this. I do occasionally do some research for this, not always. And I was surprised to see actually 10 clubs through to the next round, and then of course in later rounds we've still got another 9 clubs to come into it. So we've got the Isthmian Premier clubs that we've talked about, Eastbourne Borough, Worthing, and obviously Crawley and Brighton to come in later rounds. But yeah, we've got 10 clubs through. Burgess Hill needed a replay to beat Sutton Common Rovers. A couple of other teams needed replays to get through as well, including Peacehaven. They're through. I can actually, although it's online, and I would urge people to go to our website, I can give you a quick rundown of the ties that involve Sussex clubs in the next round, which, as you say, is August the 19th. So we've got Lancing going to Badshot Lee, Burgess Hill Town at home to Erith Town, Crawley Down Gatwick did very well to beat Three Bridges, by the way. They're at home to Hamworth Villa. Crowborough are away to Farnham in the next round. Eastbourne United, who had a good win at Phoenix, they're at home to Sheerwater. East Grinstead are at home to Hythe Town. New Haven, who beat Little Common in the last round, are at home to Spelthorne. Bexhill have got a big tie away to Ramsgate, who are quite big spenders in the Isthmian South East. Midhurst and Eastbourne are through, and they're away to Sheppey in the next round. And Peacehaven, there's only one Sussex derby in the next round, Stenning Town against Peacehaven. So lots of interest right across the county in the Cup. And the fans of those clubs will already be starting to get excited about wondering how far through qualifying they'll go. A couple of years since we had a Sussex non-league team in the first round proper, but that's always our hope, isn't it, to get one or two teams to go that far. Throws up some great stories, and yeah, plenty of interest in that next round next week.
Well, you say you hope teams get that far, but as long as they don't have to go away to Carlisle, Steve, that would be my only request. That wasn't much fun.
Your favourite away ground, isn't it?
Oh, yes. It was a good day out for Horsham. For those who don't know, Horsham ended up playing Carlisle in the first round of the FA Cup a few years ago, but getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and getting back when it was 1 o'clock in the morning the following day wasn't much fun. But never mind. Good day out. But moving from football to cricket, Sussex Sharks have kicked off their campaign in the newly christened Metro Bank One Day Cup. The Sharks began their tournament at Durham last Friday before home games against Northampton, Derbyshire on Sunday and Wednesday, respectively. It seems last season's semi-finalists have endured a less than ideal start to the competition, Steve. How have they fared in their opening 3 games? And are you still confident they're going to advance to the knockout stages?
There's no way to dress this up. It's been a disaster so far. And no, I don't think they are going to get to the semi-finals. To get to the semis, they would probably now have to win 4 of their last 5 or even all 5. The first of those 5 is away to Somerset tomorrow, and you have to worry about their chances there. They've just had a nightmare start, I'm afraid. They got hammered by Durham in the first game. Durham scored something like 420, which is always going to be hard to chase. You know, however well you bat, you're always up against it, chasing that sort of score. They then went away to Northampton, actually played well for a lot of the game, scored about 240 in a slightly reduced number of overs. They had 45 overs. They looked well on top in the Northampton reply, and Northampton just threw the bat at the end and won with a little bit to spare. And then on Wednesday of this week, yesterday, as we're talking, away to Derbyshire at Derby, scored 299 for 8 with Haynes and Pajara both batting well. That's quite a competitive score, but Derbyshire knocked it off by losing only 2 wickets. The head coach, Paul Farbrace, afterwards described some of their fielding as atrocious. And he said, we just didn't bowl well. We gave them too many lives. And he said, no excuses. You know, we can't go on saying we're still learning because if we produce performances like that, we're not learning. So I'm afraid bottom of the table so far after 3 games, 5 more games to come to turn it around, but it's hard to see them qualifying, which is a real disappointment, really. And Sussex will have to look at why it's been so poor.
Do you think they'll pick up at least 1 win?
I'm sure they will. It's that sort of competition where it's like the 2020 in a way, where you do get teams all sort of capable of beating each other. I can't see it coming at Somerset tomorrow, but they've got another 3 home games to come. You would hope that, in front of their own fans. They've got Gloucestershire and a couple of other teams to come. I forget who those others are right now. But yeah, if they can pick up a win in the next 2, then that just gets things going again. It becomes a confidence thing, doesn't it? You don't want to get too downtrodden and keep losing in the manner that they are losing. So hopefully they'll turn it around in the next game or 2.
Well, fingers crossed. Meanwhile, in the Sussex Cricket League Premier Division, only 1 game was completed last Saturday as torrential rain swept through the county. It was another case of 10 points all round, except for Mayfield, who got 20 for beating Bognor with 1 ball to spare in a T20 match. Leaders Cuckfield remained 38 points clear of East Grinstead, with Eastbourne staying bottom, accompanied by Mayfield in the drop zone. Shall we have the very first Steve Bone prediction corner of the season, chaps?
Let's have it. I've been waiting 3 months for this.
We've all been waiting for right then. Starting with the man himself, Steve Bone. How do you see Brighton against Luton going?
I think this is going to be a bit of a surprise. I think Luton are going to get a draw there. I think Brighton might have I think Brighton are going to have a very good season, and it wouldn't surprise me if they end up in the top 8 again in a European place. But I think 1-1 draw to kick off at home to Luton, which might be a bit underwhelming for some.
Derren, do you see it going the same way?
Brighton may get the win. I think Luton will be fired up. I think they'll give a really good account of themselves. But I just think Brighton will. They're capable of controlling the possession a bit more and to take some of the steam out of the Luton attack. So I'm going to go 2-0 Brighton.
Frankie, how do you see it going?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a close game. I think Derren is right. The fact that Brighton are so good at keeping possession will tire Luton out a lot. But they are, from what we see in pre-season, they are still very fragile in defence, and I think Luton can capitalise on that. So I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw. I spoke Luton up very well for the last 46 minutes, so it's going to be 5-0 Brighton, and Rob Edwards' our job on Sunday. But yeah, I feel that first game buzz, and I'm sure they've sold out that away end as well. Will spur them on. Like I said, they will see Brighton how many goals they can see in pre-season, very soft goals as well, and look to capitalise on that with 2 over 6 foot strikers looking to bully them.
Crawley Town are also at Salford City at the same time. Derren, how do you see that going for Crawley?
Yeah, they had a good start, didn't they? So yeah, I'll go for a 1-1. I think at Salford.
Steve.
Yeah, I think I know they lost to Exeter in the cup, but that was no disgrace in midweek. Some good signs, and the reports we got from our man who was at the game Saturday were quite positive. I think they're going to grind out a gritty 0-0 draw at Salford.
And Frankie, what about yourself?
Yeah, Salford is obviously a difficult team to go and play away, but they have started quite well. So I'm also going to go for a 1-1 draw.
Finally, 3 more general Premier League questions. Frankie, who's going to win the league?
Manchester City.
Derren?
Brighton. No. I think Brighton will do all right, though. I think they're going to be okay. But I'm going to go for either Arsenal or Man City. If I had to choose, I'd go Man City.
Steve, is it a City clean sweep?
I'm sorry to be boring. I think Man City will probably win it for the next 3 seasons, to be honest.
Yeah.
Man City to win, Arsenal to be runners-up again.
And who do you think's going down, Steve?
I think Luton will go down. I know we're talking, we've spent most of this podcast saying all that, they might surprise a few people, but I do think they'll go down. I think second half of the season, they might run out of legs a little bit. I think Brentford might go down.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's second season thing. Can't see them repeating what they did last year. And I'm between Bournemouth and Nottingham Forest for the third one. I'm gonna save Bournemouth because of some South Coast sympathy, and I'm going to go for Nottingham Forest to go down as well.
Frankie, what about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, the first one I would point out is Wolves. I think
Yes.
Wolves are better looking in horrendous trouble. Obviously, just lost their manager, no new signings, and sold all their best players. So that's, and possibly some financial fair play penalty points coming later on in the season. So they look in trouble. I'd also agree with Steve. I think someone like Bournemouth, again, I know they did amazing things last season. They kept most of their squad, but second season syndrome might kick in. And then Sheffield United, again, who have recruited incredibly poorly, had a squad, again, very similar to Luton, that was very much based on championship players and good championship players, but they've sold their best 2 players, one of them to Burnley, which is bizarre. But those 3 clubs in particular, just because of the poor recruitment, and you look around the squad, there isn't a lot of quality there. I think those 3 teams are the most in trouble.
Derren, who you can sign into the drop?
Yeah, I'm going to go for Sheffield United and Bournemouth. And then I kind of agree with Steve as well. I've been thinking about Brentford as well. I think Ivan Toney was such a big player for them last season. He's going to be missing. And yeah, I think Gary O'Neill, I think he did such a good job at Bournemouth. If they hadn't have got him in, I would have feared for Wolves. But I think O'Neill is he's capable of doing a good job there. So yeah, Sheffield United, Brentford and Bournemouth I'm going to go for.
And finally, this is a 2-parter, Steve. Where will Brighton finish, and will they win a cup this season?
I think they won't win a cup, but I think they might finish 6th and get in the UEFA Cup next season.
Derren?
Yeah, a bit more progress from last year, I think.
Yeah, I think this European, I think a lot of the other teams have strengthened as well. Although I still think Brighton are further ahead in the project than Chelsea and Tottenham. I think they're a stronger team, but those 2 teams aren't in Europe this year. Chelsea and Tottenham only have the Premier League and the FA Cup, and the Carabao. So I think Brighton, it's going to be tough because they're in Europe, but I can see them around about 8th or 9th, I think.
Frankie, what about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm still laughing at Steve calling it UEFA Cup. I haven't heard it called that for a long time. It's much better.
No, sorry.
Europa League. No, it's a much better name.
What about the Cup Winners' Cup? Does that still go?
but on that, I think Brighton's season, as with most teams like that, will depend on how far they go in Europe, because obviously the knockout stage will prioritise the league for anybody. I don't think they'll go past the group stage in Europa League. However, I do think if they get into the Conference League, they could really do quite well in that. And that's still a great, European adventure for any club, especially Brighton. So I feel that Brighton will finish 10th. Because if they go far in Europe, I think they'll find it difficult to compete on both fronts for a squad So I still think for a first season in Europe to be a top 10 club is still a great achievement. So I think if they get 10th, that's and go far in either the Conference League or the Europa League, they can do well.
Well, we'll wait and see, won't we? Thank you very much for your predictions, chaps, and thank you very much for joining me today. You can catch up with all the latest sports news covering everything we've talked about today at sussexworld.co.uk/sport. Thank you very much for listening, and we will see you all next week.